House been talking with Walmart about a safety net for the employees that were going to lose their jobs today, because I'm looking at a sign right now from Sam's Club that says this club will be closed on January 11th, 2018. That's today, the day that Secretary Mnuchin talks about how wonderful there will be increases in pay for Walmart workers.
I'm not aware about a conversation about a specific safety net. I can tell you that we're excited about the fact that they've raised minimum wage. They have increased opportunities when it comes to paid family leave, and that they are increasing salaries to over 1 million American workers. We think that's a positive. In terms of specifics on a safety net and conversations around that, I couldn't speak to that.
With welfare reform, is there a status report? Because I understand that Ryan and McConnell are not together on issues of welfare reform as it relates to education. Where does the president stand on this back and forth?
We're having conversations about that. We think it's important policy to look at, but right now our focus primarily is on the budget, and secondary is getting a deal done in regards to immigration on DACA and border security, and most likely moving on to infrastructure from there. John?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Two brief questions. The president said yesterday that, and I quote, "We are going to take a strong look at the libel laws." Now, many lawyers said that was an unusual statement because all libel laws are at the state level and not the federal level. Was he referring to states should take a look at libel laws or something else?
I think certainly states should take a look at it. Look, the president's frustrated with the misreporting and fake news that regularly takes place. He is tired of the media's obsession over recent fictitious book on the president and his administration, and he thinks that when things like that happen, there should be some action of recourse. He's simply stating that it should be looked into. Francesca?
I mean,
Sorry.
He meant the states, not that there should be federal libel laws.
I think he was speaking generally that libel laws should be looked at.
My other question is the administration have any reaction to the reports of the arrest of former Iranian President Ahmadinejad, who was leading a protest movement against the regime?
Not at this time. No, John. Francesca?
Thank you, Sarah. Back on the president's first tweet this morning in FISA, he said that it may have been used, the FISA Act, to surveil and abuse his campaign. What specifically was he talking about there when he said may and abuse and surveil? Could you point me in the right direction?
Look, I think that this is something we've talked about many times before. There are a lot of things that indicate that there was surveillance at Trump Tower, and I'm not sure what the clarification is needed on that front. Trey?
Thanks, Sarah. Two questions for you. First, a few days ago you said the White House did not have any reaction to the transcript that was released by Senator Feinstein related to Fusion GPS. Is the president aware of this transcript? And does he have any reaction to the FBI references within the transcript and what was said by that gentleman?
We certainly think it's a gross overstep by Senator Feinstein to release that transcript. There's been a lot of comments about obstruction of justice, and frankly, the only people that we've seen trying to influence the investigation are former Director Comey and Democrats in Congress, and that would include Senator Feinstein, Representative Schiff, who have both selectively leaked to the media witness interviews. We see that to be a big problem and something that should certainly be considered and looked at.
And my follow-up question, today Ecuador announced that it's granting nationality to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Does the president agree or disagree with this decision by the Ecuadorians?
I haven't spoken to him about that.
Can I ask you on Iran again? When the president went through the exercise in October of decertifying but signing the sanctions waivers, he said words to the effect of fix it or he wouldn't do this again. The fix was supposed to include some legislation which hasn't happened yet. Is the president comfortable with where the fix it part of this process is right now, and what is his feeling about what a fix would look like?
Look, the president still strongly believes this is one of the worst deals of all time. And one of the single greatest flaws is that its restrictions leave Iran free in the future to openly develop their nuclear program and rapidly achieve a nuclear weapons breakout capability. Obviously, we see big problems with that. The administration is continuing to work with Congress and with our allies to address those flaws, and we'll keep you guys posted as a decision decision on that front is made. Hallie?
Thanks, Sarah. I want to ask actually about offshore drilling, but before I do, I'm hoping you can clarify something that you said a couple of times now, which was that a lot of people were confused by that tweet. So Mike Pompeo...
Actually, I didn't say a lot of people. You guys said a lot of people were confused.
We weren't confused, but some of you were.
Some of you
said. Yeah. So I want to ask about that, because Mike Pompeo was obviously out talking about this, pushing for this. Tal Barsh, a lot of people in the president's administration were representing the president's position on this, that he wanted this to pass. His tweet today was confusing. It was contradictory. It just was. So how are people supposed to trust, not us as reporters, but lawmakers, stakeholders, policymakers, that the people representing the president's position actually are?
I think that the premise of your question is completely ridiculous and shows the lack of knowledge that you have on this process. I've tried several times. I'll do it a 10th time here. Look, the president supports the 702, but he has some very strong concerns about the FISA program more generally. Again, this is why he put out a memo last week outlining such, and why the D&I director put out a new policy this morning. I'm not sure what the confusion is there.
I just want to be clear, Sarah, before I ask about offshore drilling, that you definitively are saying that the president's tweet this morning was, in your view, not at all confusing and not at all contradictory. You think that's an accurate statement? I just want to be very clear about this.
Yeah, it wasn't confusing to me. I'm sorry if it was for you. Jake?
Let me ask you about the offshore drilling ban, Sarah,
Sure,
because there's been a lot of questions about what's happening in Florida. There have been other states that have pointed to the reason this administration is given for exempting Florida, saying that they also would like to be exempt. So how is exempting Florida from the ban anything other, in critics' view, than giving a political favor to White House allies and a key battleground state?
Look, the president is a massive advocate for America not just being energy independent, but being energy dominant. That's just part of that process is the offshore drilling. It's why it's opened up for public comment. These are going to continue to be negotiations. We're going to continue to look for places and ways that we can make America more energy dominant. If that's one of them, then we're going to continue forward in that process. That's why we've opened up drilling in Anwar, the Keystone Pipeline, and cut a lot of job-killing regulations that have to do with that. We're going to continue moving forward in that process. It's an open comment period, and we'll continue to talk with other stakeholders as we make decisions for other areas and other states.
Was it not a political favor?
Thank you, Sarah.
I am not aware of any political favor that would have been part of, so no. Jay.
Thank you, Sarah. On prison reform, the president recently commuted the sentence of a first-time offender, a father of 10 children, who had been sentenced to an excess of 27 years. What kinds of injustices does the president view as priorities?
Look, the president is looking, one of the big topics of conversation for today specifically is looking at reducing the rates of recidivism, specific to helping reduce violent crime. This is a beginning conversation. This is a listening session, and we're going to continue working through this process. But that was the number one topic at today's meeting, and that's the big priority he has on that front at this point.
There have been reports out, and if you could please clarify, what is Mr. Kushner's role in the prison reform initiative exactly?
He's helping lead that conversation and put stakeholders together from a number of different areas that have expertise on this matter. I'll take one last question. Anita?
Can you just, going back to immigration, can you just shed a little bit of light on what the holdup is? Members of the Republican Party were in the negotiations. They're the ones who are saying they agree with Democrats. The administration has been in the meetings, at least some of them. So what do you all not like?
I believe there's only one member that said that there was a deal reached, and the other members are well in sync on the same page that we haven't quite gotten there, but we feel like we're close. And again, we're going to keep having these conversations. The president had a meeting here today with a number of members, both from the House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats, as a follow-up discussion on immigration. And again, we feel very strongly that we can get a deal made.
One piece that the president talked about missing, is that the issue, or is there not enough funding? Can you shed a little light?
I think it's Democrats agreeing to the other side of the deal. I think that's where we are. And again, we're confident and feel like we're going to get there. Thanks so much, guys.
Well, there you have it. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders wrapping up what turned out to be a very extended briefing, talking about everything from FISA surveillance to potential new sanctions on Iran to immigration. We, of course, will cover them all. I'm Trace Gallagher in for Shepard Smith. Welcome, everyone. Deal or no deal on immigration? Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona says a group of lawmakers from both parties reached an agreement on a deal to protect the Dreamers, DACA, the hundreds of thousands of immigrants whose parents brought them to the U.S. without documents. But it appears that not everybody is on board, and the White House moments ago said a deal has not been reached. President Trump this week told lawmakers he would sign legislation to protect the Dreamers. He said he'd sign whatever bill Congress gives him, but then he later added the bill has got to include the wall. Still, Senator Flake told reporters that the president has mostly abandoned the idea of building a wall. He says it's more likely that a fence will go up along some stretches of the border. Let's get to the chief congressional correspondent, Mike Emanuel. He's live for us on Capitol Hill to sort this whole thing out. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Tracy. Good afternoon. It sounds like there is a small group of senators that has reached an agreement in principle, but there's still plenty more work to be done. Republican Whip John Cornyn of Texas says he appreciates the contributions of these senators, but the immigration issue is not going to be agreed to by just a handful of people. Cornyn says he has not seen the proposal. One of the senators trying to cut a deal talked about where things stand a short time ago.
We're supposed to be meeting today to set out a series.
We have an agreement that we're, the bipartisan group I'm talking about, the six of us working, that we're shopping among our colleagues now. We don't want to release details until we talk to more of our colleagues, and that's it.
One senator who's not impressed, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Let's go to him.
Deeper on this. 2013, Democrats seemed so interested in border security. They talked about it. They talked about how important it was. All of them voted for a bill for $700 million of border security. Now it seems like they don't care about border security at all. Can you understand what the difference is? What's happened?
There does seem to have been a shift in Democratic elite opinion here. In 2006, Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton all voted for the Secure Fence Act. And here we are just 12 years later, and we don't have that built, and there seems to be strong resistance among a lot of Democrats.
What do you think it is? What do you think it is? Is it simply just trying to play politics and deny the president a victory? What is it?
I'll let the Democrats speak for themselves. But I think
we've been trying to. None of them will talk to us.
Most Americans realize that part of security at our border is a physical barrier. You can call it a wall, you can call it a fence. It obviously has to be supplemented by Border Patrol agents and technology, and that's part of the negotiations right now. But it has to include a physical barrier, as we already have in several places along our southern border.
So it's not just us. You've detected a change too.
There's been a bit of a change since Chuck Schumer voted just 12 years ago for over 700 miles of secure double fencing at our southern border.
Got it. Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you all.
So you heard Tom Cotton, Republican of Arkansas, conservative, who has basically been critical of any possible deal that this small group has negotiated. He wants a physical barrier at the border, which is something the president has been pushing for, and perhaps that's why we're hearing from a lot of folks that this may be a small group of senators agreeing on something, but there's still plenty of work ahead. Trace?
What about the other side, Mike? What are we hearing from Democrats on this?
Democrats sound very optimistic. You had Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer saying earlier today that a deal on DACA, these young people who were brought to this country by their parents, is within reach, accompanied with some more border security. And the House Democratic leader sounded hopeful as well, noting the president wants a deal.
He supports the Dreamers, DACA he calls it. That's okay. And wants to have some border security. We all know we have a responsibility to secure our border, so we could find our common ground there. That's all possible. I think people of goodwill are coming together on both sides of the aisle, both houses of Congress, to get the job done.
It is important to note if and when there is agreement in the Senate, that does not guarantee passage in the House, so there is still plenty of work ahead. Trace?
A lot of work ahead. The chief congressional correspondent, Mike Emanuel, live for us on Capitol Hill. Mike, thank you. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts. And, John, it's really no surprise that Jeff Flake's team and the White House are kind of on different pages when it comes to this bill.
Yeah, and Trace, not long before the press secretary came out here for the daily briefing, there was a meeting in the Oval Office that I'm told got heated on a couple of occasions when the senators came over here and they were presenting their plan for what to do about the Dreamers. The president said that he appreciated that they were talking in a bipartisan bipartisan fashion, but when he looked at the plan that they had to propose, he said they have a long way to go. The president also took a call from Dick Durbin on the Democratic side of the Senate earlier today, said he's pleased with the bipartisan progress that's being made, but they still have a lot more work to do. So he sent everybody back up to Capitol Hill to say, you've got to get a little more of what we want here at the White House into this plan before I'm going to sign off on it. Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the briefing a short time ago sort of summed up the White House position. Listen here.
I can't speak to the specifics of Senator Flake. I can tell you that a deal has not been reached, and we've outlined what a deal would need to look like on our end for it to happen. You guys got to come into the room in a pretty unprecedented way and sat in there for almost an hour listening to the president talk about it, listening to the president commit to getting a solution on this. Right now, we're counting on Republicans and Democrats to come together, which we think they will, to make a deal on DACA and on border security.
Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who was one of the primary Republican point people on getting some sort of fix for DACA that includes border security, called the proposal that was presented to the president today a, quote, pine needle of a deal, an Arkansanism that Sarah Huckabee Sanders did not repeat. Cotton also said that this was a joke of a deal. The White House didn't go that far, Trace, just saying that they need to do better, they need to do more work before they come back to the president. Trace?
Yeah, first time I'd ever heard pine needle. John Roberts, stand by if you would. The White House is also weighing in on the president's apparently contradicting statements about a spy program. We will cover that and much more next. Well, the White House weighing in after President Trump seemed to contradict his own policy over a spy program. The House passed a bill to renew this program this afternoon, overcoming the fallout from apparently conflicting statements from the president and the White House. The Senate still has to take up the measure. It's known as Section 702 of FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Last night, the White House pushed lawmakers to preserve the useful role it has in protecting the lives of Americans. Then this morning, the president blasted the law, tweeting, quoting here, House votes on controversial FISA Act today. This is the act that may have been used with the help of the discredited and phony dossier to so badly surveil and abuse the Trump campaign by the previous administration and others. Now, we should point out the co-founder of the firm behind the dossier told Congress that it is political rhetoric to call the information phony. Now back to the surveillance program. The president apparently tried to clarify his initial tweet, writing, with that being said, I have personally directed the fix to the unmasking process since taking office, and today's vote is about foreign surveillance of foreign bad guys on foreign land. We need it. Get smart. Moments ago, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders denied that the president's tweets contradicted each other. Watch.
We don't think that there was a conflict at all. The president fully supports the 702 and was happy to see that it passed the House today, but he does have some overall concern with the FISA program more generally. The president doesn't feel that we should have to choose between protecting American citizens and protecting their civil liberties. He wants to do both, and that's exactly what he's going to do.
For clarity, the law allows the National Security Agency to spy on foreign targets without a warrant, even when they communicate with Americans inside the United States. Critics say it is a major invasion of privacy. Federal investigators say it's a powerful tool to fight extremism. Let's get back now to our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts. He is live at the White House. John.
Trace, good afternoon to you. It was a real oops moment from the president this morning, and the reason why is because his national security team, led by the Homeland Security Advisor Tom Bossert, have been out selling members of Congress on the need to renew the 702 authority, saying it's an absolutely critical tool to protect the United States of America. The heads of all of the intelligence agencies also out there to convince members of Congress we need to have this thing renewed. And then the president sends out that tweet this morning, which contradicted a statement that Sarah Huckabee Sanders said put out last night. It really seemed to criticize the FISA program altogether. It left a lot of people on Capitol Hill sort of reeling this morning, wondering where the president really stands on this issue. And it led to some avoidable moments, such as when the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, came out and said, well, listen, the president's saying all sorts of different things about this thing. Maybe we should put off consideration of the bill. Listen here.
In light of the irresponsible and inherently contradictory messages coming out of the White House today, I would recommend that we withdraw consideration of the bill today to give us more time to address the privacy questions that have been raised. as well as to get a clear statement from the administration about their position on the bill.
Now, I talked to a number of people throughout the administration during the day today about the difference between the tweet that the president sent out first thing this morning and then what seemed to be a cleanup on aisle 702 later on when the president tweeted out that he was, of course, supporting these 702 protections and going after people, foreign targets overseas. I put that question to Sarah Huckabee Sanders today, who said, "What are you talking about?" Listen here.
Can you tell us why his first tweet sparked off a flurry of activity and phone calls?
I'm not sure about the flurry of activity. Again, to us, that's a pretty normal day, and we're always engaged with members on the Hill, members of our staff, so that seems pretty standard practice.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that a lot of us in the media might have been confused about what the president tweeted out this morning, but she wasn't. I can say, and I have a great relationship with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she is in the minority because, Trace, there were a lot of people, and many of them up on Capitol Hill, who had no idea what the president was talking about this morning, and a lot of people here at the White House who've been selling hard this idea of renewing 702 authority, who also had no idea what he was talking about. Trace?
And as I was reading in for the show, John, I too was with you and the rest of the people on Capitol Hill. I had no idea. There was some confusion there. John Roberts, live for us at the White House. John, thank you. Let's bring in A.B. Stoddard. She is the associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics. And A.B., you just kind of heard that back and forth between John Roberts and I. And whether intended or not, this clearly caused some confusion. But the White House says, no, it's absolutely perfectly clear. If you read them in context, it's clear. What do you make of it?
Well, I think John's right. It's clear that it was, I liked his line about cleanup on aisle 702. It was, the president corrected himself. He's done this before. He has made statements on Twitter without being briefed, and he's had to do a cleanup before, or others on his staff have done it for him. And when this kind of thing occurs, you often see this denial from whether it's Sean Spicer in the past or now Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the microphone, pretending that it was all, making sense and it was consistent when it obviously wasn't.
Yeah, but there is a point here to be made, A.B., that in the past the president has said that he is concerned about the civil liberties of Americans, and it kind of wends its way into the FISA bill. So there's a little bit of truth even in the confusion. Fair to say?
But he needs to make it much more clear. He needs to discern between what is the legal capture of conversations that foreign, non-U.S. citizens are having overseas, and we have reason to be capturing those conversations, and what he is concerned with. And he obviously jumped to a conclusion that made it sound like he was opposing the renewal of this program, and that's why you had all this concern on Capitol Hill and probably in capitals around the country, around the world.
Yeah, and there was also some confusion. I mean, this White House briefing was pretty wide in scope. We had Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, starting out, and then we ended with Sarah Sanders. A lot of talk about immigration, about this DACA bill, and then Jeff Flake and his people came out saying, look, we think we've got a deal on this DACA bill, and then pretty much everybody in line started shooting it down. I was telling John Roberts earlier, no surprise that Jeff Flake and the White House are on opposite pages, but this was pretty stark contrast.
Right. This issue is so tough. And obviously, the president deserves credit for earlier this week bringing both sides together in an open conversation that was all captured on camera for people with different viewpoints to try to come to a compromise on this. He did say he would sign anything that they agreed to in the House and the Senate between both parties. But we are not there yet. As Mike Emanuel said, we're really looking at a lot of different factions in the Congress between the parties, within the parties. Congressmen Labrador and Goodlatte are not on the same page as Senator Jeff Flake and Senator Graham are. There's tremendous pressure on the left, Trace, to make this a big government shutdown standoff and to not give on something that could actually be described as a border wall or fence. So I don't think we're close to the end yet. I just think that they don't know where the votes are going to come from. And just because a group of R's and D's come together and find something they think sounds great doesn't mean in the end it'll be blessed by their leadership in both parties, both chambers, and even President Trump, who has gone on to a few separate positions on this question of a fence and wall in the past few days himself.
And I got to ask you for your take on this, AB, because there were a lot of questions about Iran, about these sanctions on Iran, and they tend to be confusing because the new sanctions that both Steve Mnuchin was talking about and Sarah Sanders, these are not with the nuclear deal. This is not to do with the big bank, the bank sanctions that really hurt Iran. These are sanctions about human rights violations, nothing to do with the actual nuclear agreement. Is that right?
Well, they're actually looking at extending the sanctions relief, but also applying pressure on the Iranians by bringing new punishment, new sanctions for ICBM testing. So if there's ballistic missile testing in the future, they would have to come under sanction for that. So they want to sort of keep the agreement in place and keep going, not break up the deal, but also apply new pressure on the Iranians. We'll see what the actual official word is tomorrow.
A.B. Stoddard, great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Trace.
Well, more ahead on the confusion over immigration talks and whether lawmakers actually have a deal, as A.B. was talking about, to protect young immigrants. We'll talk to our senior producer for Capitol Hill, Chad Pergram, to help sort it all out. Coming up. Well, a lot of drama on Capitol Hill over the Dreamers, immigrants whose parents brought them to the U.S. without documents, and a lot of conflicting statements from senators on whether they have reached a bipartisan deal. Let's bring in our senior producer for Capitol Hill, Chad Pergram. And Chad, if I'm reading your emails correctly here, as it stands right now, the people who say there is a deal are standing by their stance, there is a deal, and those who say there's not a deal are standing by their position that there is not a deal, correct?
That's absolutely it. And what you have is this bipartisan group of 6 senators who say they have an agreement in principle among them. I talked to Bob Menendez, Democratic senator from New Jersey, who said that now they're going to try to pitch this to other folks. John Cornyn, the Republican whip in the Senate, who's part of the other group that's been working. This is a leadership group that's kind of been impaneled by the President of the United States about working on this deal by next Friday. He says, you don't need 6, you need 60. You need 60 votes to break a filibuster. And you need to get bipartisan buy-in on both sides of the aisle. You need to get a lot of Republicans on board here. That's going to be the problem. I went to Tom Tillis, a Republican senator from North Carolina, when we were hearing rumblings that there may be a deal here. And he said, well, they're wrong. So this is going to take a while to sort out.
So I'm confused, Chad, because you're saying that even the 6 are planning to pitch this to the larger body. If they're planning to pitch this up the chain, that would mean they're admitting there so far is not a deal, right?
And we don't know what those details are. They're saying there's a deal in principle among those 6, but that's not the same deputized group of John Cornyn, Dick Durbin, who's part of both groups. You also have Steny Hoyer, the minority whip in the House of Representatives, and Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader. They have been working with John Kelly, the White House chief of staff, trying to work something out. So, you people kind of riding in both cars here. And again, the key is to get buy-in by Republican senators. What this is going to come down to is what will the president accept? How far will Republicans be willing to bend on DACA? And how far will Democrats be willing to bend on immigration policy?
Yeah. Chad Pergram, our senior producer on Capitol Hill. Chad, good to see you. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Well, President Trump was scheduled to meet with his national security team this afternoon, and we're waiting to hear whether he announces a decision on the Iran nuclear deal. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said a decision is coming this afternoon, and minutes ago, the Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin earlier said he does expect more sanctions against Iran. Rich Edson is live at the State Department. Rich.
Well, Trace, the State Department is describing the meeting at the White House as a decision meeting on these Iran nuclear deal deadlines that are upcoming that the White House has to figure out. Aides are pushing the president, some of the aides are pushing the president to continue waiving sanctions against Iran, essentially keeping the United States in the Iran nuclear deal, even though the president has called it an embarrassment and the worst deal ever. But the aides' point is that it keeps the U.S. in the deal while the United States Congress continues to deliberate on how to change U.S.-Iran policy. They're looking at a host of different things, perhaps changing the deadlines and structures and to the president's certifications on Iran that keep coming up every 90 days and just as often. Also, stronger enforcement of the deal and perhaps wrapping in the ballistic missile program in Iran to the way that this operates. So that's the Iran nuclear deal. It seems likely the president may keep us, the United States, in that deal, at least for now. On a separate end, the United States, though, continues sanctioning Iran for its other behavior that doesn't involve the nuclear agreement. That's what the Treasury Secretary was talking about today, in particular, Iran's support of terrorism and its ballistic missile program.
Are you expecting any new sanctions on Iran to come from Treasury?
I am expecting new sanctions on Iran. We continue to look at them. We've rolled them out, and I think you can expect there will be more sanctions coming. We have as many sanctions on Iran today as we have on any other country.
Now back to the nuclear agreement. European countries that also signed on to the Iran nuclear deal met with Iran today in Brussels. They're basically pushing the United States to stay in the deal. Back to you.
Rich Edson, live for us, the State Department. Rich, thanks. The battle over federal surveillance program could also cause trouble for the effort to avoid a government shutdown, right? A Republican senator is threatening a filibuster with the deadline for both bills just over a week away. We are live in Washington with that next.